What is going on, everybody? I hope you're having a great day today. This is Alex in the Fresh Fantasy Podcast, and this is the 30th episode of Season 3. In this episode today, we will be breaking down guys we feel are undervalued in fantasy and deserve some more love. And that may be a lot of people, but these guys are really being overlooked, and you need to be paying more attention to them in your drafts. Joining me today to break this all down is one of the hosts of one of the top fantasy football podcasts in the world. He is a former Florida Gator, known for being as sharp as a machete, but as swift as a fox, with over 139,000 followers on Twitter. He is CBS's Jamey Eisenburg. Welcome to the show, Jamey.
Alex, thanks for having me on. That's a hell of an introduction, so I appreciate the kind words.
No, of course, but we're gonna dish out some more kind words today on some of these players that we feel are overvalued. Training camp, as we're recording this, is just beginning. We're already seeing the hype on James Cook. We might talk about later in this episode, and a lot of other guys. This is my favorite time of year. Of course, there are a lot of beat reports that are going to get overblown, but I'm here for the hype. I'm here for getting excited and feeding my own narratives. But I think the guys that we have on our list today are legitimately guys that are not just feeding the narratives. They're guys that are legitimately going way too late in all of your drafts right now, and guys that you need to be buying in more. So you are the guest today. We will start with you. Who is your first undervalued player for today?
Oh, boy. I think one guy for me is Nyheim Hines. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor is the guy there, and understandably so. He was amazing last year, really amazing the last two seasons. But I think, what you hear from Frank Reich, and I got a chance to speak to their offensive coordinator and their running backs coach this offseason for a story that I did on Taylor for our site and also for our magazine that we partner with Beckett Sports. They're going to use Nyheim Hines quite a bit in the passing game, and it makes sense. You saw they kind of went away from it last year. I know that bothered Frank Reich a little bit. I think, when you look at this receiving core, Michael Pittman, we all love him and expect him to do great things, but it's, unproven guys behind him. And so I think we're going to see both those guys, Taylor and Hines, in the backfield quite a bit. Hines is one of those guys, every couple of years we get, there's always good pass catching running backs, but every couple of years we get a guy that scores, north of 5 touchdowns, has that, 60, 70 catch season. That can get close to 1,000 total yards. And you're like, oh, why didn't I start this guy more or value him more? Clearly better in PPR, sometimes okay in half PPR, obviously not that relevant in non-PPR. But if you're rewarding catches, Nyheim Hines, I think, could be maybe in the top 5 of receptions among running backs. I think certainly top 10. But I do think he's somebody that's going to have a big season catching the ball and be a big part of this Colts offense.
Well, I think the biggest thing that you mentioned is the target competition. Not only is he already a good receiving running back, but he has as little target competition as it can possibly get right now. And yes, Jonathan Taylor is in the backfield, and that limits him. But again, this is a guy that literally was a top 15 running back in 2020. He's not far removed from that at all. And like they said, they're going to be going back to him. They're going to be going in the passing game. And anytime you can get a quarterback that likes to target running backs like Matt Ryan, a player that's in a good offense, and a player that's already good at catching passes, those are all ingredients of a player that can do really well. My first undervalued player is a player that also sticks with that same theme, and it's Kenneth Gainwell. Kenneth Gainwell is someone I'm really excited about. This is a Scott Barrett tweet. Among 2021 running back leaders in fantasy points per touch, Kenneth Gainwell was second. Here are the top 7. Austin Eckler, Kenneth Gainwell, Cordero Patterson, Kareem Hunt, James Conner, Aaron Jones, and Leonard Fournette. That is an elite list. So maybe Kenneth Gainwell is a severe outlier in that list. But again, he already showed that talent in the fantasy points per touch, but he's also playing in a good offense. He's also in an ambiguous backfield where Miles Sanders said, do not draft me this year. I do not want to be on your fantasy teams. There are reports that he bulked up another 10 pounds because he's going to get a bigger workload this year. And there's a legitimate chance he could take over as the pass catching running back in this offense. Is he another guy similar to Hines that you're also on, or are you feeling him a little bit less on the talent side of things with all the running backs that are in that backfield?
I think I am feeling, yes. I think for, one thing that I'm hoping we don't get is we don't get a Jordan Howard type guy brought in, because I think that will speak volumes to where they are with Gainwell and certainly being, I don't know, the direct backup to Miles Sanders. I don't know if he needs to be in that particular, painting that particular brush of, has to be, just waiting on a Sanders injury, because I think he'll play regardless. The thing that will be curious is what happens if Sanders does miss time, which has been the case. He's missed at least 4 games each of the last 2 seasons. Will Gainwell get the majority of touches? Will it be a Boston Scott situation? Who's going to be the one scoring touchdowns? Because that's kind of been the problem for Sanders, and Scott has certainly taken over for that role when Sanders has missed time. But yeah, I think Gainwell's, the Eagles, I don't know if Nick Sirianni necessarily wants to replicate what Andy Reid had and even, what Doug Peterson had there. But I think they've been kind of searching for this next Darren Sproles. And I think he's a little bit more of a beefed up, version of that, and someone who can do a little bit different things and have some more success as more of a natural ball carrier. So yes, Gainwell is somebody that should absolutely be on your radar and someone that could certainly, be flying up ADP and draft boards, especially if Sanders does get hurt before the start of the season.
Well, especially when someone like Gainwell and Nyheim Hines, these are guys that are going free in drafts, and someone like Gainwell could legitimately lead that running back room in touches, and you can get him at running back 50. I mean, these are the exact guys that, okay, let's grab him. If he doesn't succeed week one and, the next Elijah Mitchell comes out, go grab him. But there's a chance that you grab Kenneth Gainwell at the end of your draft, and he ends up getting the most touches week one. And then look, you have a running back one on an Eagles offense that I think is going to be even better this year once they added in A.J. Brown. So I really like Gainwell. I really like Hines. I think those are the exact guys that you want to be targeting in your drafts. We'll go back to you for your second undervalued player.
Love the setup for Ramondre Stevenson. As we saw last year, stepped in and played well when Damian Harris was banged up. And, we'll see if Harris can survive another season. What this Patriots offense is trying to do. They're trying to get a little bit more modern. So, they bring in some additions in the passing game. Devontae Parker, Tyquan Thornton, and so better Mac Jones. That's all we keep hearing. So I'm expecting he's going to at least be whatever progress he makes in year two, he's going to make progress. So I think they'll trust him a little bit more. I don't think this is going to become the 2007 Patriots where they're throwing the ball all over the place and Mac Jones is, making historical strides. But I still think this is going to be a run first team. And, even with the lack of a true offensive coordinator and losing Josh McDaniels, I'm sure Bill Belichick's mantra is still going to be the same. Run the ball, rely on our defense, not make mistakes, not put too much on our quarterback. And so first you have the handcuff lottery ticket type of, appeal for Stevenson if there's a Harris injury and knowing that he could step into that role. But I think he'll also play alongside Harris. And then the other part of it now is James White opening the, preseason or opening training camp on the PUP list. There's a lot of talk about Pierre Strong maybe filling in that role as the pass catching back. But I think Stevenson has shown them a little bit last year and shown them a little bit this offseason that he could also fill that role. And as we saw early in the season last year, James White, I think, had 2 games with 6 catches in the first 2 games of the season. Certainly he was targeted heavily to open the year. Stevenson could be a big weapon for Mac Jones, even if James White if James White is out to start the season. So Stevenson's got the lottery ticket upside. He's got maybe the pass catching role if White is not there. And another guy, kind of in the same range of the 2 that we talked about with Hines and with Gainwell, probably a little bit more of an appeal for Stevenson, because I think people, if you are looking to get a piece of a backfield that is going to be run heavy, he maybe fits a little bit of a different mold than those 2 guys. But another guy I think that we'll see, more positive reports this training camp will make his ADP rise as well.
Well, I agree, but beyond that, all the underlying efficiency is in on Ramondre Stevenson. I mean, he was PFF's 3rd highest graded running back in the NFL as a rookie, not among rookies, like in the NFL. He also broke a tackle at the 4th highest rate among all running backs last year. He reportedly, according to the beat reporters, has impressed everyone in Foxborough this offseason for whatever that means. But beyond that, I think the interesting thing to note is that, reports have said that James White might not be ready for the start of the season. That is, he's still having hip issues. And I know that they've talked about Pierre Strong, but Ramondre Stevenson said the biggest part of his game that he wanted to work on is his pass catching. And Ramondre Stevenson's not known as a pass catcher. Well, neither is Damian Harris. So if Ramondre Stevenson really did improve his pass catching, and we saw hints of it last year when he did catch the ball, he could be the pass catching running back, but he also has a lot of upside should something happen to Damian Harris. And I think he's only going to get better going into his 2nd season. So I think a lot of things are pointing up for him. And I love targeting good running backs and good offenses, similar to someone like James Cook, who's the next guy that I wanted to talk about, sticking with this theme of guys that can catch passes. James Cook, again, the reports out of camp so far have been great, but the biggest thing about James Cook is that, he has the pass catching ability. He's in an ambiguous backfield where the only guys that he needs to get over are Devin Singletary and Zach Moss, who've been very inconsistent so far in their careers. I know Devin Singletary had a great stretch to finish last year, but he wasn't a good pass catcher. And this team loves to throw the ball a lot. They don't like to run the ball a lot. Again, James Cook also in a great offense. But the most interesting thing I found that Dwayne McFarland from PFF put out the other day is that among running backs that are going a lot higher in high stakes leagues versus ESPN leagues, James Cook is one of those guys listed. He's going almost 30 spots higher in high stakes leagues than he is in regular ESPN leagues. A lot of sharp people are very on James Cook and really see a lot of upside. And like I said, it's another pass catching running back in an ambiguous backfield that could legitimately take over as the running back 1. And he's Dalvin Cook's brother. The Cook brothers have a little bit of a good history in the NFL for what that's worth. So is James Cook another guy that you on? Or are you more going towards some of these other, handcuff type running backs?
No, James Cook is certainly in this range of guys that we've been talking about. The one thing that I'm curious about, you sort of mentioned this, and I just don't know what the answer is. If Devin Singletary goes down, does James Cook become their RB1? Zach Moss is still on the roster, so we'll see what happens with his role. They bring in Duke Johnson, we'll see what happens with him. Yeah, the success he had last year, with the Dolphins. I would like it to be James Cook, if something happens to Singletary, but the nice thing about it is you don't have to wait for a Singletary injury to get value out of James Cook. They've made it pretty clear with what they wanted. They tried to get J.D. McKissick. That didn't work. He decided to stay in Washington. So what they do, they go to the draft and they get James Cook. I think it's a little underrated, but you remember what Duke Johnson was earlier in his career. He was a pass catching back. So they've clearly targeted a certain type of running back that they wanted on this roster. And I think that we'll see Cook used as a third down guy. You've heard some people in the front office and the coaching staff there say they don't want to maybe overwork him or put too much on his plate. They don't have to, because Singletary did finish the season strong for them. We don't necessarily love him in the fantasy community, but the Bills obviously value Devin Singletary to a pretty high level. And so we'll find out again what happens if there is a Singletary injury. But I do think that James Cook will have a role in the passing game, could lead them in receptions from that position. We're going to see a much more diverse Bills offense as well. What the things that they've done and changed, moving on from Beasley and Sanders. Crowder obviously can play the Beasley role, but I think we'll see obviously more from Gabriel Davis. Stephon Diggs will do his thing. We could see some more 2 tight end sets, because now that they've established Austin Knox and they bring in O.J. Howard, if his pedigree can ever live up to what the potential is, or his potential could ever live up to the pedigree is, then, we'll see what kind of his role is. But yeah, I think James Cook obviously offers a lot. The question will become, though, if Singletary goes down, is he a league-winning type of guy? I hope that's the case.
Yeah, well, especially like we said, when they targeted J.D. McKissick last year, and then they go in and draft someone like James Cook. I think that speaks volumes, like you said, and how this offense is changing and what they want to do. But I think the other worry about that is, okay, like Josh Allen's probably still their goal line running back. So what is the absolute upside for Cook if he might not even take over as the running back one in carries? Should Devin Singletary go down, but is he also going to get enough volume like inside the 5? But again, at the price point that these guys are going, like Ramondre Stevenson or Nyheim Hines or Kenneth Gainwell. Like, these are guys that legitimately could have really big roles in their backfields, and I think that's exactly why we're on them. But going off of running back, we'll go to a different position. We'll go back to you. Who is your third undervalued player?
Yeah, I'll go Michael Gallup at wide receiver. He's got to prove that he's healthy, obviously, coming off the ACL tear from last year. But I think, you see what his role will be when everybody is healthy. And, we're hoping for Jalen Tolbert to step in and play well. We'll see if James Washington offers anything. But there's a lot of targets vacated without Amari Cooper and Ced Wilson there. And, we're expecting, clearly a lot to go to CeeDee Lamb and Dalton Schultz, which it should. But there's still an opening. And Dak Prescott loves Michael Gallup. You go back to that week 1 game last year before Gallup had the calf injury, and he had 7 targets in the first half. They're not afraid to use him. They're not afraid to use him, I think, in a variety of roles, probably a little bit different than maybe what the perception is, that he's just a deep threat. I think he can certainly do more. He showed that before CeeDee Lamb joined the team, and when it was, kind of the transition to Amari Cooper, he was Dak Prescott, one of Dak Prescott's go-to guys there when they were sort of figuring out their receiving core. And so spending the money to keep him, despite the fact that he suffered the injury, I think speaks volumes. We know this is still going to be a team that's going to score a lot of points and certainly do it through the air. And so Michael Gallup, kind of with the theme that you've been giving of, these guys that are free on draft day, everybody kind of overlooks him because he's hurt. And so we'll see what the training camp reports are once they report in Oxnard in California and hopefully get going. And, if he can be one of these miracle guys that can avoid going on the PUP list to start the season, then you get the early season value. But he's somebody that I think if you're in the Marquise Brown camp, great guy to pair with, because Brown's going to go probably in that round 4 or 5 range. We know come week 7, DeAndre Hopkins is back. Probably by week 6 or 7, we're going to get the best of Michael Gallup for the rest of the season on. At least that's the hope. So, kind of make that transition if Brown does struggle a little bit just because of the competition for targets. So just a strategy you could also employ if you take Marquise Brown early, maybe take Michael Gallup a little bit later.
Yeah, I like that. What do you think Michael Gallup's ceiling is for this year? Like, let's say he comes back by week 4 or 5, or maybe even earlier than that. Where do you think is the best that he could possibly finish after he comes back?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be a top 20 guy, so you got to have your expectations in check. But, when you play in 3 receiver leagues, most of us do. You play with a 3 receiver league in a flex, with most of us do. He can certainly be in that 3rd receiver role, be in a flex role. I would say probably a top 30 receiver is maybe the ceiling. And again, we're talking probably points per game as opposed to total points, because he's going to miss some time. So, just have to understand what he is, but again, you sort of have laid it out with a lot of these running backs. If they get off the slow starts or you're just not comfortable and there's somebody out there that you can make a move for, these are easy guys to move on from. But the upside could be pretty nice if Michael Gallup does become that guy that he was once upon a time, and maybe the guy the Cowboys are hoping to see.
Exactly. I think another guy that I really, really like, that again is another wide receiver that's going later. Not necessarily someone you can really drop after the first couple weeks. Definitely not. But Treylon Burks is that guy for me that I love where he's going right now. I mean, he's going in the mid 40s across most formats right now in drafts. And, everyone knows that he was drafted in the first round of the draft. But his biggest competition for targets is a 30-year-old Robert Woods coming off a torn ACL and maybe Austin Hooper. But the biggest thing I like about him is the fact that not even the talent, the fact that 67% of the Titans' targets are up for grabs this year. And he's currently is the wide receiver 44 on Underdog. Diana Rossini of ESPN also said recently that she's heard a lot of really great things about Treylon Burks, that he's lost weight, he's in shape, he really took the coaching to heart. But the other thing that I really like about him historically is this by my friend Dynasty IM on Twitter put this out, that wide receivers that hit these three marks, alpha size, early declares, and first rounders. The players that just hit these three, which Treylon Burks hit all three, 19 out of 22 of these players over the last 10 years have hit a top 36 season. 18 out of 22 have hit a top 24 season. 12 out of 22 hit a top 12. 10 out of 22 hit a top 5. And 7 of these 22, almost 33%, have had multiple top 5 fantasy seasons. These players, especially like Treylon Burks right now where he's going in drafts, that have good draft capital, they're hitting these marks of early declares, first-round wide receivers, they have the size margins, and the guys that clearly have all that talent there are the perfect guys to draft, especially in an offense like the Titans that have so much targets up for grabs and not a lot of competition. I think Treylon Burks is like the perfect target to get in the late middle rounds of your drafts. What about you? How do you like Treylon Burks? Do you think I'm getting a little overexcited about the dip right now?
I don't. I think, when you said 67%, I thought you were going to say 67 seconds after they traded A.J. Brown. They selected Treylon Burks, which is basically what it felt like. They had a guy in mind, when moving on from their number one guy. And like you said, I find it funny when a lot of people get, I don't want to say overexcited, but, lean more toward Robert Woods over Treylon Burks. And I understand why. He's proven, he's certainly coming from a situation with the Rams when he was healthy, he was successful. But you said it. He's 30 years old. He's coming off an ACL tear, and he's got to, sort of reinvent himself a little bit in an offense that's not going to be as creative, certainly not going to have the same type of volume. And really, we saw Robert Woods struggle early in his career in Buffalo, go through the Rams car wash with Sean McVay, and come out on the other side like a different player. I think he's going to be a different player in Tennessee as well. This is the type of guy in terms of Burks who could be similar to A.J. Brown because of some of the plays that he'll make and the routes that he'll run, and I think how they'll use him. And so, for what you're saying, and I think your beliefs, the best thing that happened to you is he couldn't make it through minicamp practice. And he seems like he's out of shape because it's just going to drive the price down. And then you get a player who could be a difference maker. So it's going to be really fun to see how these rookie receivers go, between London and Burks and Wilson and Olave. You could, Jameson Williams when he's healthy, and all these guys, just to see who's going to be the best. And, maybe not just their rookie season, but certainly long-term for those of us that play in dynasty leagues. But Treylon Burks to me was always the second guy. I like Drake London just a little bit better, but he's right there. It's basically 1 and 1A, and I think Treylon Burks is got as much upside as anybody. The question that becomes clearly is the volume going to be there for him to support him, and can he step in right away and be a difference maker as a rookie? I'm excited to find out.
Definitely. I'm super excited too. And I think too often when we see these first round type wide receivers faded, it never ends up going well for the people that are fading them. We saw with Jamar Chase in the drops last year. These are the guys that you want to target and buy the dip when there is one, because they're going to come flying up ADP. We are one Treylon Burks highlight in training camp away from him rocketing up boards or one big play in preseason games. So now it's the time to buy because, okay, even like, let's put it this another way. Even if you don't want Treylon Burks on your team, draft him right now, because if he's one play away from you being able to trade him for a much better player, he's a good investment that you're also making, even if you don't want him on your roster. I think you should, obviously, but I think that's another reason that you should draft him, because his value is not going to get any lower than where it is right now as a first-round wide receiver right now. But that is someone that I am really excited about. But we move on to our fourth player. Jamey, we will go back to you. Who is your next player on your list you feel is undervalued?
Tim Patrick. You look at this Broncos receiving core, obviously there's two headliners. Cortland Sutton has the 1 year of production. his sophomore season before he suffered the ACL tear. And Jerry Jeudy obviously is the guy that, we're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen there. But, Tim Patrick's kind of been their steady Eddie. He's been their injury guy. When we saw the Sutton ACL tear, he stepped up. He had a big season 2 years ago, at least by, standards of what the Broncos passing game has been because of the lack of, quality quarterback play. And then last year when Jeudy missed time with the ankle injury and dealt with some other problems, we saw Patrick step up as well. And so we'll find out, how Russell Wilson's going to lean on these guys. And he's never been in a situation where he's had to support 3 guys. So I don't think it's going to be a scenario where all 3 of them are ultra successful. But Tim Patrick's almost like the lottery ticket wide receiver. He's a handcuff type of guy that if one of the other 2 guys go down, you've already seen it, what he's been able to do stepping in for them. But what if he's better than Jeudy? Maybe what if he's better than Sutton? I don't think that's going to be the case, but I'm willing to find out based on the fact, again, that he's sort of free in drafts. And so, we'll see how Wilson does with more opportunities because I do think he's going to set a career high in pass attempts going to a new team without the restrictions of not letting Russ cook. I think we're going to finally see Russ cook. And so if this passing game does explode, and I think we're going to see a lot of shootouts in those AFC West games between how all those offenses will go, Patrick has sort of the big playability that you look for, if he gets those opportunities. I think he can do a lot of things with his route tree. And it's going to be fun to watch, how these guys all sort of compete. I know speaking to Nathaniel Hackett a couple of times this offseason already, he said that they're not just going to put guys in certain roles. They want them all to play, inside, outside, do a variety of things. So Patrick may be on the field in some different situations where one of the other 2 guys is off the field. That would probably be at the detriment of people that are certainly investing heavily in Sutton and investing heavily in Jeudy. But again, Patrick's going to be on a lot of my rosters. I just want to see what sort of unfolds. And again, if he struggles early in the season, doesn't get those opportunities, somebody that's easy to move on from.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think off of that, Tim Patrick has been really great in the red zone where Russell Wilson has kind of thrived. I mean, Tim Patrick last year had 36% of the Broncos end zone targets, and Russell Wilson is ranked top 2 in end zone throws in 3 out of the last 4 years. And, reportedly we've heard that Tim Patrick and Russell Wilson have great chemistry. Tim Patrick, I know points per game finishes are better than actual finishes, but, in finishes, Tim Patrick's been the wide receiver 42 and 44 in PPR the last 2 years, and now he's going outside the top 50. When Russell Wilson comes in, I think the only way is up, and then he's going to beat his ADP for sure. But like you said, he has a lot of upside as that handcuff wide receiver where if, Jerry Jeudy gets hurt or Courtland Sutton gets hurt or one of those guys isn't cutting it, I mean, Tim Patrick has stepped up when giving opportunities, and I think he'll continue to do so, especially as a guy that has thrived on those red zone, end zone targets, similar to where Russell Wilson, also seems to thrive. So I'm super excited about those guys. My next player is also a wide receiver that I'm super excited about, and it's Allen Robinson. Talked about him recently on the podcast, but this is a man that was a top 10 wide receiver in 2019 and 2020. In both of those years, he beat man, zone, and press coverage at a top 20% rate of all time, according to Reception Perception. The Rams led the NFL in passing rate inside the 5 last year. They were second in passing rate inside the 10. Robinson's now playing with the best QB of his life. He's at this prime age of 28, and they also just gave him a 10% raise on his last contract. I know money is not the most predictive thing for fantasy football, obviously, but the fact that he's coming off the worst year of his career and they're paying him more money than he did in his last contract year says something to me that they have big plans. And I know that, training camp hype and stuff like that isn't the biggest thing, but when there's a significant drumbeat constantly that we keep hearing throughout the offseason that this player is going to play this role, I tend to believe that a little bit more when it's coming from multiple sources, not just August highlights. And we've heard McVay say it. We've heard other beat reporters say it. They're expecting big things from Allen Robinson. The last thing that I want to mention is that this guy has never had more than 7 touchdowns since 2015. And now he's joining a team with the best quarterback of his life and a team that's top 2 in passing rate inside the 5 and the 10-yard line. To me, that means Allen Robinson the perfect target where he's going in drafts right now. He's coming off a bad year, but he clearly has the talent, and he's stepping into this Robert Woods, Odell Beckham role that they were both really successful. And I'd argue at this point in their career, Allen Robinson's the most talented player out of all 3. So who's to say that he doesn't finish as even like a wide receiver 1 this year? I think that he's going to smash ADP this year. What about you? Are you feeling the same on Allen Robinson, or do you think that, last year was a sign that he might be a little more cooked than I believe?
No, I'm with you. It's just a matter, I think, where you have to sort of reach for him if you're in the camp like we are of believing in it. Because like you said, the ADP is still a little bit low. And this is one of those guys that he's not going to be a dramatic ADP riser because I think the Fantasy Pros ADP had him in round 6. So maybe he gets to round 4. I doubt he gets into round 3. So we are talking about maybe a 2-round rise. Most likely he'll end up, back into round 4, middle of round 5. I do think, it's fun. We just had this conversation this morning on our Fantasy Football Today podcast about Robinson, where our host Adam Mazer was sort of arguing the other side of why he's, being drafted where he's being drafted. I asked him this question: if it was Robert Woods coming back from the ACL injury and just stayed with the Rams, and Beckham was gone, where would we be drafting Robert Woods right now? Probably same range, around 6-ish, because people still value him. If it was Beckham, no ACL tear, re-signing with the Rams, and was coming in as the wide receiver 2 there without Robinson, so Cup 1, Beckham 2, where would we be drafting him? Probably in the same range, around 6. I'm with you. I think Robinson's a better player than those guys right now. It's easy to sort of, follow the negative narrative of, is he cooked? Is he washed? How much of it last year was his skill has deteriorated and he just doesn't have it anymore? Because look, he's not a speed guy. But you said it. He's never been with a quarterback like this. He's never been with a coach in a system like this.
Yeah,
they see so much zone. He's going to just be able to settle in spots and use his body and his physicality to a different level because the matchups that he's going to get. I mean, how many times did you watch a Rams game, from the Super Bowl all the way back through the beginning of the season, where Stafford and just seemed like Cooper Kupp was wide open? It's going to be fun to see Allen Robinson in a lot of those same situations. And so, yeah, I think he's got top 15, if not higher upside. I have him ranked, I think, right around 15, but would have no problem taking him as my number 1 receiver. I just think there's so much to like about the situation for Robinson because he does have the ability to bounce back in a big way.
Well, especially when the wide receiver 2 on this team under McVay has been top 15 like the last few years. I mean, they made a great career out of Robert Woods, and I'm not saying Robert Woods is a bad player and they made him. No, I'm not saying that. But someone like Robert Woods really thrived in that role, and the player that's playing this role seems to thrive. When Odell Beckham came in, everyone thought he was cooked. He came in and thrived in that role. And I think Allen Robinson, again, most talented player out of all those. I love all the points you made. Allen Robinson, definitely I love the fact that you have him right around 15 right now. I think that's fantastic. We each have one player left on our undervalued players before we get into your 2022 flag plant. Jamey, we will go back to you. Who is your final player on your list today for undervalued players?
Yeah, I know you have a guy at this position, so I'll stay with the same thing. I'll go Derek Carr, and I know your guy is Kirk Cousins, and I go back and forth about which of these two guys is going to be better and which of the two is the better draft value. I mean, you see they both got significant upgrades this offseason. Carr getting a wide receiver. I'll let you talk about Cousins and obviously the coaching change, but Derek Carr's been a okay fantasy quarterback. Obviously, earlier in his career when he had Crabtree and Cooper and that receiving duo. Never had a 4,000-yard season, but, he was on an MVP track before he broke his leg. I think it was the 2016 season. Then he sort of had to, sort of find his way a little bit. But this is the best receiving core from a talent standpoint he's ever had, with Devontae Adams, Waller, and what Hunter Renfrow showed last year. I think Josh McDaniels, will, bring some nice things to this offense. And again, referencing the Broncos, we're going to see a lot of shootouts where, passing volume is going to be key. And I think, Derek Carr is ready for that. He's certainly shown a lot of different metrics, fourth quarter comebacks and, how he throws the ball, down the field, all these things. I don't really care about almost anything that he's done prior to this because I think this is sort of a reset button for him without Gruden there, with a new coach, with a new receiving core, his buddy from college. We say this year after year after year, wait on the position at quarterback. You don't have to reach for Josh Allen in round 2. Get these guys at value. And so once you get past the top, 8 to 10 quarterbacks, there are going to be still a few guys that can be league winning type of quarterbacks. Derek Carr, I think, is one of them. So love the upside for him. He's not a rushing quarterback. He's not going to be Trey Lance. If Lance hits, he's not going to be Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts or those type of guys. But if you like the Tom Brady's, you like the Dak Prescotts, you like the guys that don't necessarily, I don't know if Prescott, qualifies depending on how much he's going to run this year. But you know what I mean? The guys that don't necessarily have the 500-yard rushing upside anymore. Carr's going to challenge for 5,000 yards this year. He's going to be north of 40 touchdowns. I think it's going to be a fun season for him in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a fantastic take because, again, he's already been high every year. And then you add into someone like Devontae Adams into an offense, especially when Derek Carr was literally in fantasy season till week 17 last year. He was the QB12. He was the QB12. But the funny thing about that, him being QB12, is the fact that he did it with Darren Waller missing 6 games. So now we get Hunter Renfrow improving and getting better going into his next year, a full season of Darren Waller, and just the best talent at the entire wide receiver position in the NFL. that makes a big difference as a quarterback. And, they played at Fresno State 9 years ago. So that is also something to keep an eye out for. Obviously, I'm being a little bit sarcastic with that. But I'm excited about Derek Carr. I'm excited about Devontae Adams. And I'm excited about what this offense can do under Josh McDaniels that, has supported a really good fantasy quarterback before. I'm not saying Derek Carr is Tom Brady, but like you said, I think Derek Carr takes the leap. But I think Kirk Cousins also takes the leap. I mean, Kirk Cousins now has Kevin O'Connell, who was the Rams offensive coordinator last year and made Matthew Stafford have one of the best seasons of his career. But Kirk Cousins has been the QB 13 or better in 6 of his last 7 seasons. Literally basically a QB1 in 6 of the last 7 years. He's been a QB1, top 12 QB in 5 of those last 7. He was QB 13 one last year. But Justin Jefferson is still getting better. Irv Smith is still getting better. KJ Osborne is still getting better going into his 3rd year. And they already said, Justin Jefferson came out and said, I love this offense. We're going to pass way more. And if they're going to pass way more and Kirk Cousins has already been doing really well as a passer in a run-heavy offense, and if they can keep Adam Thielen healthy for the whole year, I mean, the sky is the limit for this offense. I will be bleeding purple in my drafts a lot. I really like these guys. I don't think their defense is phenomenal. I think they could be trailing in some games as well, which could really allow them to throw the crap out of the ball, which would be amazing. So I'm with you. I think Kirk Cousins and Derek Carr are both quarterbacks in that range. I like Tua in that range as well, but I think those are all solid options that you can get. What if you paired them together? How would you actually, let me ask you that real quick. How would you feel about pairing Kirk Cousins and Derek Carr playing the matchup game every week? If you don't draft a quarterback early, you go running back, wide receiver, tight end heavy, and then at the end you draft those 2 guys. How comfortable would you feel in that draft?
Very comfortable, and it's not just, 1 QB league. That would be a good 2 QB pairing, a super flex pairing. It's not. Yeah. It's not bad. And it's certainly, if you like to go, depending on how your draft is, I think we're all sort of in a little bit of Scott Fishbowl hangover. Yeah. There's no 3rd round reversal. If you take a non-quarterback in round 1, you could probably end up with, especially if, the draft falls your way, with these 2 guys as a round 2, round 3 pick of your, your two number 1 QBs or your 2 starting QBs or one being your super flex. Yeah, I love it. And just to, piggyback on your Cousins take, the Vikings actually were pretty pass heavy last year, which was a little bit of a surprise, but that speaks to sort of what you said about their defense. I do think the difference that we're going to see with O'Connell is where you knew under Mike Zimmer, if it's 1st and long, they're running. If it's, 2nd and short, they're running, whereas this offense is going to keep you on your toes. They're going to throw in some non-obvious pass situations that they weren't doing in the past. And that's where I think we're going to get a lot of excitement. They're going to create some mismatches with their talent. The Irv Smith return, I think, is huge. We'll see a lot more of KJ Osborne. The benefit of working at a place like CBS is, our reporters are connected to a lot of teams, and one guy that I trust, who knows, some of the coaches on the Viking staff there, they love KJ Osborne, absolutely love him, and we're going to see probably him on the field a lot more when everybody's healthy. And I don't think it's going to take an Adam Thielen injury for Osborne to have to or get the opportunity to step up. So it's going to be a fun offense. Really, really looking forward to it as well.
I agree. I mean, Patrick Peterson, I think on his own personal podcast said if any player is going to break
on our site, yeah.
That was that?
Well, it's called All Things Covered. It's Patrick Peterson and Bryant McFadden. It's a CBS podcast, yeah.
Yeah, I actually didn't know that. Didn't he say on that podcast that he thinks if any player is going to break out, it's KJ Osborne?
I didn't hear him say that, but I'm sure he did. Like I said, they love him. They absolutely love KJ Osborne.
No, I love it. And he's going into his 3rd year. I mean, number 1 wide receiver when targeted in passing rating last year. Obviously, it's a little bit of a cherry pick stat, but something to keep in mind of for a guy going into his 3rd year. I'm really excited about KJ Osborne and Kirk Cousins this year. But one thing, though, Jamey, that I'm even more excited to hear is what your 2022 flag plant is, your boldest prediction that we believe in. The final question for the show today. The floor is yours. Who is your 2022 flag plant?
I'm going to stay in Minnesota. It's Alexander Mattison. He's going to be on all my teams. Okay. Every team that I draft, we went through this cycle of running backs or the conversation running backs of guys that have the chance to help you win, that have independent value. He does not have independent value. But should something happen to Dalvin Cook, who's going to be 27, I think we've sort of said how much fun this offense is going to be in Minnesota. We've seen it, and anytime you get I don't have to wait to see if, Isaiah Spiller is going to be good should something happen to Austin Eckler, or if Rachaad White's going to be good if Leonard Fournette has eaten his way out of his role with Tampa Bay. Alexander Mattison has stepped into a role multiple times over the last couple of years. Last year, it just sucked for Dalvin Cook that he had to miss the 2 Lions games. But, we saw last year that Mattison is basically a Dalvin Cook clone from a production standpoint. And you're already hearing some rumblings. Dalvin Cook said it himself. I think it was either today or yesterday, that he, I think the story I saw was 2020, he said he was the best back in football. Today, he says we have the best backfield in football. And so maybe we see with the new coaching staff, Madison gets a little bit more opportunity without an injury. Nobody wants to see that if you're a Dalvin Cook guy. But if you're getting a little bit of run from Madison, and then maybe we get the 2-3 week injury that Dalvin Cook seems to suffer, this guy's going to win you your league. So I don't know if he's going to necessarily, there's no real bold prediction here outside of should something happen with Dalvin Cook, Madison's going to help you win your league. But these are the type of players I want on my roster. So I'll be patient with him. This won't be a guy I drop after a couple of weeks because he's not doing anything. I'll wait it out because I know at some point, unfortunately, Cook will miss some time, and then we'll see Madison win you that week and maybe win your league.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a 17-game season, which favors the Alexander Madison truthers. I mean, Dalvin Cook's never played more than 14 games. He said a lot of different things. And again, both of us would rather that Dalvin Cook just plays 17 games and he's amazing. You're not saying that you're not rooting for Dalvin Cook to be coming off the field on a stretcher, obviously. But Alexander Madison has averaged close to 30 touches a game, and it starts without Dalvin Cook. He is the unquestioned workhorse whenever he is out. So should he miss time, and he has every year, those Alexander Madison games are so worth it. And if you could get 3 games of borderline RB1 production out of Madison and near the last rounds of your drafts, I think I'm going to buy that every day of the week and twice on Sundays. So I absolutely love that take. I think that is fantastic. But Jamey, it has been fantastic having you on the show today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Before we go, you do a lot of great work at CBS. So tell the people where they can find it, your Twitter, anything that you want to plug. The floor is yours.
Well, first off, thanks for having me on, Alex. This has been fun getting a chance to talk some football with you. So hopefully we get a chance to do it again. You can find our podcast wherever podcasts are available, also on YouTube, on our YouTube page, Fantasy Football Today. And then our show, Fantasy Football Today on CBS Sports HQ, which is our 24-hour streaming network. That starts Monday, August 1st, noon Eastern. So that's our flagship show on CBS Sports HQ. And you can check it out as we, break down everything with training camp and get you ready for your fantasy drafts this year.
I love it. That is as good of a plug as you can get. Some people get caught off guard. You had that ready. I absolutely love it. And I've loved having you on the show today, Jamey. But more than anything, I've loved having you listeners right along with us. It's such a pleasure to have you listening along and talking football with us. As always, we appreciate it. But the last thing real quick that you people need to know, I've already mentioned it on a lot of podcasts. We're closing out July right now. Make sure you enter the NFL jersey giveaway that we are doing. All you got to do is leave a 5-star written review on any of your favorite podcast platforms. Send it to me at Alex Caruso via DM on Twitter. Tweet it at me, and we will put you on the list. So as always, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much to Jamey. But you guys already know, you got to leave a review. You guys already know what to do. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.